If you've got hip-hop questions, I've got hip-hop answers. Email me right now at d.podcast@gmail.com. That's d.podcast@gmail.com. Happy 2015. How the fuck are you guys doing out there? When I got this email, I was super excited to answer it because I hope you've all seen this interview with Nancy Grace and 2 Chainz. The email comes from Curtis T, and he says, "Hey, Mr. D Respect, I can't believe 2 Chainz made an appearance on the Loudmouth Show, aka the Nancy Grace Show. This feels like some Twilight Zone shit. Have you seen this interview? What are your thoughts on weed legalization in general? And who do you feel won the debate?" Thank you for the question, Curtis. This is the oldest argument, aside from maybe arguing about race. Arguments that always seem to go in circles. One person says, yeah, look what it does to the children. Then another person says, oh, what about alcohol? Alcohol's legal. Should we make burgers illegal too? Because somebody can have a heart attack and get heart problems from it. My stance on weed is pretty much just like your stance is probably on weed. I really have sort of a libertarian view on drugs, which is the government shouldn't be able to tell me what I can and can't take. And that goes for just about every other drug all across the board. If somebody is hooked on heroin, he shouldn't be in jail. This is a sick person and they shouldn't be occupying a jail cell. This is pretty much how most people feel here in New York City, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people on your side of town feel as well. So, however I feel about the argument, obviously I would say 2 Chainz won the argument. There is no winning this argument. Okay, you're watching 2 people who are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Think of this from the perspective of somebody who watches Nancy Grace's show every fucking night. I mean, do you think that for 1 second they're sitting there and saying, well, that 2 Chainz guy, he's got a point. This is all about good parenting. That there's no one saying that. So this is basically, I feel the same way about this, just like when Bill O'Reilly and Jon Stewart went head to head. It's just, this is an opportunity for Jon Stewart to look good in front of the conservative, and this is the conservative's opportunity to look great in front of the liberal. Nothing is really meant to be solved here. It's just what's being presented. And you weren't going to walk away from this feeling like you've learned something because you've already painted Nancy Grace into that corner. It doesn't matter if she has a good point, which she's incapable of making a good point, because Nancy Grace, I'm not even convinced that Nancy Grace is a real person. What I mean by that, I don't think she's, a fucking clone, but her character, I'm sure it's a very exaggerated, very sensationalized character that she does for TV because, so people can love her, so people can hate her, so she can be this polarizing figure. She's got to be the way that she is. She has to speak in this, but 2 Chainz, what about the children? She has to always be alarming. And you could sort of see that 2 Chainz sort of decided before everything that he was going to be cool and calm throughout the whole thing. At the beginning, I think Nancy Grace had said something about, oh, I'm not generalizing. Don't put me in that corner. She made a very stern statement against him, and 2 Chainz didn't bite. He just sat back, because I guess all you have to do with Nancy Grace is just let her hang her own rope, because she's going to sound stupid if she just continues to talk. Do I think that there's something to be said about the fact that, that video about the parents letting the kids smoke weed is that any cause for concern? I mean, there's stupid people everywhere. What do you want me to say? There's stupid people everywhere, and I'm sure their decisions can be a lot worse than letting their kids smoke weed. But that's sort of the way that people like Nancy Grace perceive this whole argument. They just exaggerate and say, well, if it's legal, it's going to be accessible to everyone. And that's the strongest point that 2 Chainz brought up, which is always the strongest case against anyone who has that argument. Well, if it's illegal now, you can get a hold of it just like you can get a hold of a cup of coffee. Well, guess what? I can go outside right now and get myself a fucking, I can get myself 220s, for $30. Guy in the corner selling haze. He's got a special, and I can go and get it, with that special. So it's just as accessible as it probably would be if you could get it at a dispensary. My view has always been kids have to be educated on weed. They have to be educated on drugs. So a kid's got to know that there's a difference between heroin and weed, cocaine and opiates. You got about prescription drugs. They have to know the degrees of everything. There's degrees to all this fucking shit. They have to know the dangers of caffeine, which 2 Chainz mentioned that he doesn't even give his daughters because it might be too strong for them. So if you don't educate children about the degrees and you don't separate, because you have to separate weed from all other drugs. Okay. I haven't done any other drugs except for marijuana. I haven't done anything outside of that, but I've seen people who were cokeheads. I grew up in a building where I saw people that were crackheads. I see the differences in people. I see the effects, how it just lingers on your soul when you do heroin, and how your soul is just begging you to do some more, and how you can smoke weed for 30 fucking days. And if someone tells you, you know what, you better stop smoking because you got a drug test coming up, and you're like, damn, I guess I got to stop smoking. So we understand that, and kids have to understand that as well. They have to understand that they just can't be grouped all into one bunch and say these drugs are all dangerous. Because then what happens is Junior smokes weed when he's in high school. Junior says, okay, well, this is pretty soft. Maybe I ought to step it up to another drug because, hey, if they were all grouped up into that same illegal group, then the other one shouldn't be that bad. I'm not saying that this is always what happens, but but it's something that a child or a teenager can easily, they can make that choice. This isn't the gateway argument, though the gateway argument is strengthened by the fact that it's illegal. It's more of a gateway drug if it's illegal. If you educate people, it's not a fucking gateway drug. The only way that it could be a gateway drug is in curiosity. It's not a gateway drug chemically, where it does something to you and it opens you up to other drugs. Because normally when you smoke, you don't want to do anything. Last thing you want to do is go get fucking fucked up on coke. You understand? So, that's neither here nor there. This is the marijuana argument. This is the same shit that you've ever heard from anyone that's ever had anything to say about weed. But I do want to say that there's no way that you can make Nancy Grace look stupid. Because Nancy Grace is inherently stupid when she opens her mouth. There's nothing that 2 Chainz can do except play the rope-a-dope method that Muhammad Ali made famous. Just lay back on the ropes and let the idiot just tire themselves out. And that's what Nancy Grace always seems to do. Because she's so puffed up about every single thing. Like I said, I'm not convinced that she's a real person. I'm not convinced that Nancy Grace, Bill O'Reilly, or fucking Glenn Beck, they're all like that on a daily basis, because it's more of a character than anything else. I do feel that there is a part of her that feels that this argument is a bit silly and nothing will be solved. But ultimately, what Nancy Grace is there for is, she's there to pull at your heartstrings and always tell you that the children are in danger. She does this with just about every other social argument. So weed is no different. She's always going to do that. So I just want to say that this argument wasn't meant to be won on either side. I have no fucking clue what 2 Chainz is doing on the Nancy Grace show, Curtis. But I do think that even if Nancy Grace is looked at as a fucking stupid, pretentious blowhard who just talks shit and doesn't really listen to the things that other people have to say, she's always going to have her supporters who are in her corner. So it doesn't really matter how you feel about Nancy Grace. You're not meant to follow her. You're not a part of her demographic or her audience. So this is basically, I guess, just an opportunity to showcase her, and, she can fade away into the black and just stick to her demographic. As far as 2 Chainz, I do want to say that this is what always pisses me off about 2 Chainz, and I will leave my request video of 2 Chainz in the description below. I graduated. I had a sports scholarship and all this yada, yada, yada. But yeah, listen to your fucking music. This is what always upsets me about people who don't express their full potential. This is what I argued about with Azealia Banks just a couple weeks ago. You can come on this show and you can speak intelligently, and you can have counter arguments, to all this shit. But hair long, money long, me and broke people, we don't get along. I guess which in this case would be hair long, money long, me and Nancy Grace don't get along. That was clever, wasn't it? No, it really wasn't. Sorry about that, but I just had to do it. Email me right now at d.podcast@gmail.com. That's d.podcast@gmail.com. I want to thank Curtis for the email, and I will see you motherfuckers next week.